Okay. Okay, Matt Stamp here. And I want to do an interview with Mike Graves because he is a Tai Chi fighter, and I want to start talking to Tai Chi fighters about what it takes to be a Tai Chi fighter. A lot of the guys who have actually competed, push hands, form, full contact, we need to get those guys out there and start talking and try to get more people motivated into doing more full contact fighting. Some people have the desire to go beyond push hands. So the best way to get to know what to do is to talk to people who have been there and done that. So, Mike, tell me what it took for you to get to the realm of fighting.
Sure thing. Yeah. So, obviously, I mentioned coming from Tai Chi background, so not to dig too much in that, but my training, foundational training, comes strictly from that basis. So, it was a lot of just getting form, but then from the form was really studying applications. And when I say applications, it's the regular dogma of just really static. Throw a punch, or we're gonna throw you this way, throw a punch. But then it had to get and become dynamic. And so for it to become dynamic, we start to delve a little bit more with the pushing hands, looking at it as punches coming your way, not just I want to take their balance. I want to kind of like, try to get to their center. No, the hand is coming to you. That's a strike that's trying to get to your face, to your chest. There's a scoop coming down from your leg. So how do you stop that? How do you keep that from happening? So it became more dynamic as far as we're looking at pushing hands as are strictly a bridge into fighting, into punches. And one of the things that actually helped me along that path was a little, I guess, a impromptu training with a guy by the name of Vincent Chu. He did a seminar. He was doing dynamic pushing hands, and we were doing some fighting set type stuff at a seminar. And we just happened to be in the garage of another practitioner for Tai Chi at the time named Robert Poynton. And my teacher and I were just we were in a garage, actually, just him and I, my teacher, Dave Nicholson, and we're just kind of going over the stuff we learned at the seminar. It was actually in the middle of a party that was going on outside. But we were like, hey, let's go back in there and let's work on the stuff we were looking at in the seminar. So Vincent just happened to stroll in there when we were doing this stuff, and he's watching us. Then he came up and just kind of just broke it down, really said, your pushing hands is not very martial. I didn't know what he meant. So then he started showing me some stuff. He started pushing hands with me and started striking me in the middle of, off balancing me, if you will. And I was like, oh, okay. So from that point, it's like, okay, yeah, definitely need to start working more on understanding that from a striking perspective. And so we kept working on it in that degree. We did competitions, pushing hands competitions, and the ones we did in England and of course in mainland Europe were a bit more aggressive than what you would see in a lot of the U.S. versions of pushing hands, where just really working off balance, and not the rules where you couldn't throw, you couldn't lock and sweep and all that. We did all those kind of things. So that was another branch into getting into more the dynamic use of Tai Chi, and I think for myself, I've had some things happen outside of the classroom that also informed me. I mentioned not too long ago, I posted something up about an incident that happened in a nightclub where, just I was with some friends, and then a little kind of scrimmage happened where I ended up pushing this big guy up against the wall. He hit the wall, kind of looked back, and then he, kind of took off. But also had some where I was walking down the street. I used to DJ, or still DJ now, but not in clubs or anything like that. I used to DJ and had some friends of mine that are in Leeds, England, and we did a set, and I gave some friends a ride home, and I was going to go meet back up with my other friends, and they had moved house, so I had parked on the street where they had lived, but it was a different house I was going to. So I'm walking up the street, and off in the distance, I could see a couple guys harassing people, and I thought it was just some personal stuff going on. They were fighting with some people, and it was like quite a distance up the hill, and I see them punch a guy. The guy goes over the bushes type thing, and then they're walking down the street, and there's another group of people. They get into it with them, and I'm walking. So they're coming down on the opposite side of the road. I'm walking up on the sidewalk on the opposite side of the road, looking for my friend's house. And then as we kind of getting closer in proximity, they cut across the street and say, "Hey, what are you?" And I'm like, "What? Hold on." I'll start backing off, right? And it's just the funniest thing in the sense of like it was two guys, kind of not big in stature, but just kind of taller than me, a little bit more lean, if you will. But one guy grabbed my shirt and he went to throw a punch, but I kind of went underneath his arm, and kind of like popped him off and back. And he just paused and stopped. And he says, friend, just go. And it just took off. And I was like, all right, well, what was that? You know, but it was like more of, I think, than the other scenarios up the street, you know, they had more of victims and less of someone who was actually kind of retaliating back. And then I've had some other things like, you know, similar to that that's happened where, you know, a little bit more, you know, involved. But it gave me insight about how Tai Chi works in that environment, because one thing it gave me was a sense of confidence and a sense of calmness, and to be able to, you know, to address it and such. So that played very heavily into me getting into the more of the competitive realm of doing full contact fights, where it was a sense of understanding of what you could do, understanding your sense of movement, your attributes, and knowing what parameters you're working in and how to apply those in a very chaotic sense of like not knowing what someone could do. So in a training path that we took to help us really go into that, we would have what we call our Friday nights advanced class. And that's where we worked on, I guess, more detailed kind of you know, applications and scenarios and combos and things like that. But aside from that, we had a training regimen. The training regimen consists of some of the things I did recently in the challenge was we had our sledgehammer exercise we worked on for power, try to get an understanding of how to generate power, how to maintain power and motion. We worked with the knee gong of the, you know, the iron body, iron shirt type thing, and different breathing patterns for stamina and cardio. We worked
Is
on
that some of the stuff you showed in your challenge where you're doing like the hitting and things like that?
spot on, exactly that. Yes, exactly that. So you know, in different scenarios, that was just one. We had others that we would do as well. And but one of the key things that would really help, I think, is particularly with me, was my teacher Dave asking myself and another one of my classmates, Adrian Nizart, to go along to a boxing gym. And he said, "Well, I have a friend of mine, you know, he coaches boxing, and I asked him, if you guys can go over and just kind of do the stuff that you do against the boxers. They're going to move differently. They're going to, you know, not do what you do, but you're going to get an opportunity to see how it works against folks who are really just, you know, basically trying to take your head off, and you're going to see if your stuff works, and it's going to help you, you know, and in addition to that, I can't discount that some of those things there, they, you know, they talked about footwork, how they did their footwork. And I was able to relate that to how we used or how we employed Dalu. You know, our Dalu, I think, what's his name? Alex Dong just posted a recent video up in one of the groups where he was showing like the Dalu set, you know, someone doing that, right?
I saw that.
And so, but for me, there was a direct correlation to footwork, how to take angles, how to cut angles, how to redirect, you know. And so that played very heavily, and I was able to tie the two together as when someone's throwing punches on how to move, how to get into the right position, how to go for what you want to go for, whether it's punches, takedowns, locks, you know, sweeps, whatever it may be. So it was very, very beneficial. And so it was only a few of us, though, in my Tai Chi class that even took that path.
Were you guys even sparring in the Tai Chi class, or you were just sparring with the boxers?
The only folks that really kind of sparred was myself, David Nicholson, and my classmate Adrian, that really kind of took it, you know, kind of serious. And that regard, everyone else really kind of relied heavily on what I mentioned before about the, you know, the applications and, you know, the set scenarios of like, we're going to throw, you know, a straight, a hook, or a left, you know what I mean? And you're going to, you know, do these scenarios. But us three was adamant about going, and this, I don't know what it is in the Tai Chi world where there's a fear of that unknown, but they heavily relate on saying that Tai Chi is a self-defense. And I think for me, what was beneficial to make it a self-defense was having that exposure to competitions where I wasn't, you know, going against someone in my classroom that's only going to do certain things. And I knew what they're going to do, and I knew how to handle it. When it's very unknown and unpredictable, that takes you out into another realm. You know, again, something like, you know, along with my, you know, I guess with my ex-wife, I had an incident when, you know, it's just something that was a little bit more personal, where it was another guy that was involved at the time, and I got into something with him, and then, you know, I just recall, like, I don't know how this, you know, I took his hands down and I got my hand underneath his throat and I lifted him off his feet. And he was bigger than me, taller than me, and then I had to catch myself, like, oh, whoa, hold up, all right. Well, you know what I mean? But we're in the midst of something. So I
Mhm.
know the stuff works. I've used it and I applied it, but then taking it into the ring and being able to use it in having success there. And don't get me wrong, I've had my losses just as much as I had my wins.
Mhm.
But those losses also were lessons on to things that I need to work on things that
Make
I
you
was
better.
proficient in, right? And
Mhm.
I became more proficient in those avenues. And one of those avenues was striking, because you mentioned about sparring. So I was very heavy coming out of the pushing hands realm. So I was good with sweeps and takedowns and locks and things like that. But I can honestly admit that my striking and my kicks weren't that proficient. You know, there was a big deficit in that. And I think when I went to fight the first time in pro fighting, the guy I lost to was a Romanian. He was a champion. He was a kickboxer, and I was definitely out of my depth in that regard, because he was able to stop a lot of my takedowns, or if I did a takedown, we both went down, and we would have to get back up. It was more of a lay tie, pro sandal type stuff, so it wasn't
Uh-huh.
any ground fighting or anything like that.
Were you
Um,
guys doing the takedowns in the Tai Chi class? You guys
oh
practice
yeah,
that like in live sparring, or was it more like, okay, let's work on techniques?
It was a mixture, because again, like at some point in time, we didn't have mats. So we just had the hard floor. So if anything, we would go outside Dave's backyard and do some takedowns out in the backyard there. We got to one facility, I think it's a place called Ghoul, where they had a carpet, and then they had some mats because it was a gym. So sometimes we would have mats up there. We would do rolls and stuff like that and everything. But generally speaking, a lot of classes, they're on the hard concrete or the hard linoleum floors, and we would do
Yeah.
the basic takedown sweep, but we'll catch the person. We wouldn't let them completely fall down type stuff,
Mhm.
So, but again, going back to what I said, it was only when we got serious about fighting and doing that stuff, it was only like the three of us. And Dave had built his own house, and one of his rooms that he built was a training room, and it wasn't grand size. I mean, matter of fact, a couple of students, Adrian, another one of them, I know he pushed through the windows just doing some of the stuff we did, like really broke the windows and stuff. So he started putting a big old, pad up against the wall type stuff. But that's where we would do our stuff, and it was just us really hyper focusing on that. We would sit there, we'll watch videos, we'll watch, like, one of the main ones that we would watch would be Dan Doherty's video. And this, just it wasn't necessary for the aspect of Tai Chi. It was like this, seeing how I guess if you want to call it the aggression or the interpretation of using what you have in that environment, because no one's trying to like look like they're doing a posture or form and emotion, but you are trying to stick to the principle of what gives you your power, what gives you your sense of understanding of how to apply things, right? So, but heavily we would do, we'll have bags, we'll have the little, the mitts and stuff like that. We'll do mitt work and stuff like that to work on combos. We would do, just different, just
Were you
different.
guys ramping up more towards competition? Like when competitions were coming, you would be doing a lot more like rounds and timing rounds, or were you
Dude, we would,
or was
we
this, or were you training all year round like this?
all year round, constantly. Like, and the thing about it would be funny, man, because I think I mentioned that to you a long time ago about a story where I said my teacher Dave used to charge me like 50 pounds. I mean $50, about 25 pounds at the time per hour. And one day I was there for like 3 hours, like, dang, I only brought enough money for an hour. He's like, no, don't worry about paying me anymore, because it's very hard to find a student that's going to train outside of class. Usually every time someone comes here, I'm having to show them the same stuff over and over again because I haven't spent time practicing. So from that point on, man, we start training from 3 to 6 hours at a time, just like going at it, boom, 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 just going over different stuff, different kind of, like I said, takedowns, punches, elbows. How are you going to get in? How do you set it up for this? If you bring them down here, then you have this, and you take this, and then then we would just play. We would play with a lot with each other, and that's how we made each other so much better. Adrian was about 6'1", 6'2", a big guy who primary focus was singy, so he had a lot of power, a lot of structure. So it made me better, because when I got with guys my size or in my thing, I had no trouble with moving them around, redirecting them, or getting inside of them, and worried about power. And the same thing for him, because I was a smaller guy with speed. So a lot of times when he's dealing with bigger guys, he didn't have to worry about that. His hands were fast and were able to cope. You know, But we would study a lot of tape, man. We would study a lot of even UFC stuff back in the day, the early UFC stuff, because this is
Yeah,
back in the 90s. So we would look at,
very
just
few rules.
the pure aggression and the brutality of that. Like how we handle that. What are the things that we know to deal with that kind of stuff? Yeah, you're gonna say?
So for me, the first couple UFCs was like part of my friendship, an oh shit moment for me as a Tai Chi
Right
martial
on.
artist and in Chinese martial arts. I was like, oh shit, we really have to start ramping up our training now. And one of my biggest things has always been cardio. You got to have cardio. You can't get pooped out in the fight. Did you guys do any special type of cardio training
It
or
is weird,
anything?
man, to say that because all right. So at the time I was in the Air Force, and we used to do these bike tests, right?
Mhm.
And I'm mentioning that because I remember doing my little. I think we ever do it twice a year or something like that, and then it got down to once a year. But these to like measure our heart rate, and it's like, dude, it seems like your heart's not even moving. I was like, what do you do to keep your heart rate down? But we did a lot of breath practice, man. I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of qigong practice that we did. I wasn't a runner, however, I did have a bike, so I used to bike a lot. I used to ride my bike, all over where I was at the time, Harrogate and things like that. So
Mhm.
I was a heavy bike, but I hated running, dude. And I used to always say that's the reason why I took up fighting, because I didn't want to run from nobody.
Yeah.
And it goes back to also as a childhood, up to my early 20s. I was
Mhm.
an asthmatic, so I had
Oh,
asthma.
no.
So even though I was very athletic, my I guess my kind of activity was always limited by my lack of breath. So I can say firsthand that's one of the benefits that I felt from Qigong and Tai Chi, that it improved my stamina and my breath practice phenomenally. Because since then I have no breath issues. Like folks who know me now and still train with me now, they know even when I went to that retreat down in Tampa, man, and I went for 6 hours straight from person to person. I don't get tired. I don't get worn out. And so I think a lot of that, I give credit to the way we train in our breath practice. We had different types of, like I mentioned about the iron shirt type stuff and everything like that. We had a lot of different breath patterns that we would do that would help us with our stamina. And when I would go into the ring, I had no issues with breathing, and folks will always ask me, hey, what do you do for cardio? And I was like, I would do just that. And I didn't, I wouldn't say I did a lot of rope jumping or anything that was traditional in a sense of trying to get your cardio going or keep your cardio up. But I would always say just my determined the practice, the way I practice and the amount of hours I would practice and how determined I would be in my practice and working on doing my form slow and
Mhm.
slower and in tune with my breath and my pace of my breath was very paramount for me as far as that goes. So
Mhm.
that was the best answer I can give you on that.
My for myself, like I would more go to the MMA school, spar and train with those guys, and then we had a cardio workout at the track that we did. But during what I call fight camp, like those 6 week going up to the fight, Tai Chi was my morning recovery exercise or post workout recovery exercise. Um, were you just kept doing your form all the way through
All
your
the time,
your
man. It's
training
like
or?
it was weird because, and this gotta keep this in mind for me. I started this at 25 and I had no martial art experience except for Tai Chi. Nothing else before that, except for watching the Shaw Brothers movies and pretending like I knew stuff. but
Mhm.
aside from that, I had no martial experience. Now, one thing I would also probably pay dividends to it was I used to break dance and I used to dance. I used to do choreography when I was in Germany and stuff like that. So I did
Mhm.
have some athleticism from that, right? So some movement from that, but I wouldn't say it was a
Did you do
direct.
the kangaroo?
That was my best move, dude. I can't believe she stole it. I was so envious when she saw that. Yeah. No, so that was kind of the thing for me, is that I didn't have any martial arts experience. Now, Dave, my teacher, he came from a karate background. His dad was like a Lonsdale boxer.
Mm,
He did other martial arts, aside from that, and he had a long history. But when I got to him, his primary focus was Tai Chi, and so for me, and that's all I knew, and that's all I
mm,
knew how to train. So when I
mm,
tell people, as a fighter, I consider myself a pure Tai Chi fighter because I had no other basis. I wasn't training with, like I mentioned to you, as a Tai Chi person, I went to the boxing gym to use what I knew in Tai Chi against boxers, but I
Mhm.
wasn't studying boxing. I wasn't, I wasn't doing the speed bag or any of that kind of stuff or anything,
Mhm.
man. So, it's it strictly came from Tai Chi. And
Nice.
so when you ask me about the things I did, we had medicine ball. I would, use that for power, do a lot of,
Mhm.
the waist twist, but we, throw it and catch it, boom, boom, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's maybe something that's synonymous to some of the other types of training that other folks did and things like that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I can't say there was a lot of traditional stuff that I did,
Yeah,
that's
I
the
felt like I came from the Chinese style, and when we at the kung fu schools I went to, we didn't do that much sparring. Maybe like a Wednesday night sparring and a Saturday sparring or something like that. And then when I started doing body work, I wanted to help this guy who had MMA school, and so I started doing body work for the fighters and the coaches to be able to exchange for lessons. And when I saw them doing Muay Thai, I was like, oh my gosh, they're training way harder than the Sanda guys. I better jump in there and take some classes. And then they had boxing. Of course, there's MMA, judo, and jiu-jitsu. So you know, kind of dabbled in those classes. I really drifted uh towards the stand-up, the boxing, but I always felt like I was just a Tai Chi guy going there. Of course,
uh-huh.
I'm learning the jab, cross, hook, uppercuts, and stuff. But William C.C. Chin was kind of saying where that is in Tai Chi, like your single whip is kind of like a jab. If I do
Sure.
single whip like this, right, that's like a jab. The cloud hands is like a hook, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah, yeah.
bottom hand is like a hook, right?
Right on, right on.
The step up the seven stars is like your uppercut. The brush knee with a fist. So I put it that way, at least kind of the William C.C. Chin way. And like you said, he liked to say something you said earlier, the strike as a push
Yeah, so
to
just as
off
you were
balance the
saying
guy.
that, I was literally
Yeah.
thinking that as you said that because I have and I probably can refer to it later on in some kind of link or whatever, but I haven't posted up where I use a Pilates ball and I'm having it
Mhm.
against the wall and I'm spinning and I'm like this, and I have one where I'm talking with Sean Kovoric about
Mhm.
like how I see it as like these are strikes, these are elbows, these are this. So visualization for me was and for us I should say as we train was very key, like just like you were saying about when CC Chen was saying, I saw those things as different types of strikes, different types of avenues to getting in to get to something. You know what I mean? And it wasn't. None of our movements really were set. It's like, okay, this is Wild Horses Parks His Mane, so it's meant for this. It's like, like look, this is like Wild Horses Parks His Mane, like you're the backhand. There's a backhand right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Pulling him down into your backhand. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Mhm.
this is now the same movement. Look, you're locking underneath his elbow. That's a lock right
Mhm.
there. That's
Mhm.
so. And it's funny because as I was getting ready for this, I was thinking, I was like, what? Some of the things that people tell me when I'm trying to show them stuff is like they don't get it. And I
Mhm.
say, and I was thinking to myself, it's like, yeah, because as an artist, I have creativity. And I think in the form, when you have movements in there, you can create so much out of it if you have a creative mind without having
Mhm.
to be told what it is. If you can
Right.
like glean something out of it, because if you understand yourself well enough, you can see what's inside of something and see so many variety of ways of doing it. It was funny because I was watching this show called Insider on YouTube last night, and it was about the chef who was analyzing different movies that had like fixed meals, and he was like saying how realistic they were. And one of the parts he said in there where there was this one portion on the show called Bear, where one of the chefs was had a sketch pad, and she was drawing down designs of how to place things on food. And he was like, "Yeah," he goes, "Man, that's true to form." He goes, "That's what you do. It's like your creativity is your own, and the way you want to do things, you can have all the recipes, but the way you do it and that's your own creativity." And that's how I see it when I do what I do as far as Tai Chi goes. And that's why I say when I go back to referring to only training as a Tai Chi person, I've took so much out of it and been able to relate. Now, if there's things I posted up over the years from different people I trained with that in different disciplines that said, "Oh man, yeah, he picks up this stuff very well. Like he's just a natural understanding about body movement and principle." And that's what I took from Tai Chi is understanding principle. So when I go to fight and I go to self-defense, I'm looking at principle, and I think what the Tai Chi forms have done for me is I provided a palette of things in a toolbox of things
Mhm.
for me to pull from. But it's never said, oh, only use this tool for this, only use this tool for that. It's like I
Mhm.
have all these tools and I can pick and choose when I want to use the hammer, even the hammer just to sculpt something, as opposed just to nailing and putting a nail in the wall. You know what I mean? So hope that makes sense.
I like the universal fight principle, because like it doesn't matter what martial art is, they all have like a punch or a strike, or they all have a certain kind of throws, and you can see it across different martial arts that they all kind of have these principles of leverage and everything. You mentioned the part horse's mane, so in that part horse's mane, you're almost holding a ball like this, right? And this is almost like what?
At least
The Philly
now.
shell, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The Philly shell, right? It's like,
exactly that.
yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
universal fight principles, they're there. And then, but you show your fights to like the Tai Chi world, and they're like, hey, he's doing kickboxing, he's doing something else. And it it's a sad commentary on the state of Tai Chi, that it they want it to look a certain way. They want
Yeah,
to see a brush knee move done in like a fight. They want to see like, the rooster on one leg work as like a one strike knockout or something.
yeah,
So
and I want to make 2 points on that too. And one
mhm,
goes back to the video of the was it the White Crane and the Wu stylist fighting, and the lack of
mhm,
technique in the fighting, if you will.
uh-huh,
And
uh-huh,
then how folks reflect onto what they believe was the style of fighting for those in our past, as far as what we get our, what we based our fighting on, the
mhm,
Yang style, the Wu style, Sun, and all that good business, right? And it's very hard to pinpoint anything that really determines or shows what they really use as far as and who they competed against, right? Because they may have been really good, but again, it's like in my classroom, I could be really good against my students who don't know anything about fighting, and then I can be the champion around a very poor group of fighters. You know what I mean? So
mhm,
when you get people who are modernized, you can look at their material and you can see that they are able to go into an arena and be able to express what they understand from the art, and not to discount it and then base your thing on something that you can't even see and you can't even determine how well they really use what they use, right? Because even in most books, there are no techniques in Tai Chi. There are no fighting, like talking about the old books and things like that. There are no detailed of like, all right, so I want to lock here, push you, like the old, like in the even the movies and some of the other kung fu books that I had, like the Five Animals. There are techniques on where you lock and where you grab and where you do this and then when and how, and Tai Chi is so esoteric in that realm. You know what I
right.
mean? And so much is
Mhm,
left for interpretation. So when someone says, "Oh, that's not how you use this, that, and the third," well, how do you know? How do you
mhm,
know? And if I'm expressing it because I can, the point I was going to make is I can express something and I
mhm,
can repeat it. And I can repeat it against different people. And I can repeat it against different sizes. I can repeat it in different avenues. So how can you tell me that this is not something that's part of principle, and not just stuck into a technique that I need someone to do something set, if you will. Just yeah, I'll get off my little
yeah,
so
we got the 10-minute mark.
okay.
10 minutes left.
Okay.
um yeah, yeah, that brings up a lot of really good points, in my experience as well. um So let's talk about some other kind of trainings,
Sure.
because you mentioned earlier the two-man Sancho set,
Mhm.
the choreographed one. You learned that one, right?
Yes, I
Okay,
did.
so I learned it too, and it was something I wanted to learn because I saw some demos of it, and I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. Now I never thought of it as like, oh, that's a means to an end. That's going to teach me how to fight, but it does teach some really cool stuff, like how to move with the opponent, how to counter. They're going to counter, and then you counter again. So it teaches some really good things there. But I want to caution, the viewers out here, that it's not a means to an end, but it is a great tool to play around with. You can get some really good things out of it. What do you have to add?
All right, so I'll be honest about it. I was geeked about it initially learning it, and then I can say I quickly lost interest in it, especially when I started to actually get more understanding about fighting and movement, right?
Me too.
Because yeah, so I thought it was great, and Dave and I used to work on it a lot. Like, oh, let's get this together, get this down, and do demos of it and things like that. But I can say once I got into a real fight scenario, and I just like many things I think are a bit archaic for what we're trying to do now, right? And I think it had its point at a certain point in time, and I think
Mhm.
it's had its benefit. And I still think it's something useful for training people to get them
Right.
exposure to, like you said, working in that realm, right? Because we also tried to learn it was a Singi fighting set, which was a lot faster and a little bit more challenging.
I've seen it.
Yeah, a little bit more
The
dynamic.
Anshin Pao, I think they call
Yeah, yes, and that
it.
one,
Anshin.
I mean, I like that one. I never got that one completely down. That one I really liked,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back to some of the stuff that I think folks who learn in Tongbei and things like that as well, where you can actually see it a little bit more clearly, the martial sense of it, if you will, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
all those are great blueprints, and I think they're good for, particularly even for me, because I came from a non-martial background, right? But I think a lot of significance is put on it when it shouldn't be. I think it should be something that you may be part of your curriculum to learn.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like learning another form or something like that. But then, don't hold on to it for much. That's just my perspective. I think,
Mm-hmm.
and I say this too as well. When you go and you start to spar or fight outside of your discipline, and you still try to apply your discipline as best you can, that's going to inform you a lot more about the things that you're practicing in those senshaos and those forms, right? Because you start to look at like, well, shoot, I better be cautious and aware, because even though I'm taking his elbow with this hand here, he can easily kick. So I gotta be aware of like how to keep my my lower body guarded, and my what I mean. I have to be a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more how to make sure that I still have some torque in my waist to pull them
Mm-hmm.
off balance, so that nothing comes and follows that. Because when you get
Mm-hmm.
stuck into that linear, side to side kind of movement, and that becomes the only thing that you think is available to you, if you will, and so when you take that fighting set, and then I mean, I've done these things. I got to probably find some videos where I get someone behind their elbow, right, and I'm able to pull them off balance and to do something else to it. That comes from that, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
so I can't just push it all to the side, but I know, again, it's the dynamic training that gave me more information about that than just that set alone,
Mm-hmm.
understanding like, all right, what comes after that, right? And someone mentioned that in the push thing that I just posted up as well, right? Like, pushing, yeah, you can push someone, but then you got to be cautious of what may come next. And, I don't think they were doing it. Obviously, I know they weren't doing it and thinking that that's all that's going to happen, but I always want to caveat when I do something like that. If I'm pushing someone, like I think the clip in there is one of Davis pushing one of the guys down onto the floor into some chairs, right? So we look at it as like, all right, I'm looking at the environment. If I'm pushing him against the wall, and I was pushing Sean against the wall in one of them, right? But I was so careful to know that when I was pushing him, his head was going to stay forward and he was going to hit the wall and bounce. Now, people can't tell, but they probably can see in the video where Sean would look back, because the sound of him hitting that wall was so pronounced. It was like boom, boom. So he was looking at the wall like, whoa, right? But I'm so careful in understanding how I was lifting him up that was making him kind of bow, that he was going to hit with his back. But I know how to do it where that if I push, your head is going to go back. You know what I mean? It's a
Yeah.
difference, understanding of how to use it. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I think goes into when you get into the environments of fighting outside of your realm and outside of that and trying to train for that, you
Mm-hmm.
have to escape from the routine of practicing your classroom and say, okay, we need mats, we need a different environment where folks are going to go down, folks are going to fall, and you got to be willing to take some lumps. Now, I have this lump on my wrist, on my yeah, you can see it there a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
that's from Dave doing like hand locks and takedowns, right? So it's not
Mm-hmm.
that he's trying to injure me, but we're going through the motions of trying to
Mm-hmm.
train, trying to really
Mm-hmm.
see what works, right? And you can't do that with kid gloves on all the time, you
Have you
know?
ever been, doing stuff outside the rules of like martial fighting, and like, I had the teacher do a tendon grab on my arm. It felt like a dog bite. Do
Oh
you ever do like that kind of stuff? I
yeah.
was like, oh, holy crap! It's like had it like little bruises, look like little
Yeah,
fingers.
yeah. And then not being able to move or extend the arm for a while. Yes, I
Uh-huh.
have indeed. Yes. I mean, we've done stuff with other people, other teachers as well. There's a guy by the name of Master Wang that don't talk about enough, maybe, that I got some private lessons in Bagua from, but we did a lot of pushing hand stuff from him, and a lot of our power training came from him as well. You know, some of the stuff with the large pole. That's another one that I didn't talk about as well, because I don't have one of the large poles that wobbles.
Uh-huh.
And if you ever get a chance to talk to Sean, he's used it before. It's a heavy, solid pole, right?
Uh-huh.
But I was able to make that sucker shake. Was you know, it's something if you felt it and you're able to get the tip of it to shake and feel how it shakes, and you're like, whoa! And then to do that to somebody's arm, and feel like you grab them and shove that arm back towards their shoulder, and the
Uh-huh.
response that they get from that, because the amount of power from that that's generated, and the same thing from a punch coming from that same driving forward
Mhm.
is those are the things that gave me a lot of benefit in fighting, I guess, if you will. You know what I mean? Those are some of the things that are maybe I don't talk enough about in my
Mhm.
training, or show enough of in that regard,
Mhm.
because those are a lot of things that, you know, I just do. It's just like I just
Mhm.
go and train on it, don't think about it, train with weights on my legs, you know, train with weights on my arms, you know, for punches,
Mhm.
and you know, all these different kind of things. A lot of times folks say, don't do that because you're strength training or you're doing this, but I didn't see it as that. I saw it as part of what we did. You know what I mean? And some of the stuff we got
Awesome.
from Chu King Hung as well, from the traditional Yang. That sledgehammer set that I did is one of those things as well too. So
Well, let's wrap things up. I appreciate
sure.
you really telling me some of your stories. We can probably do a follow-up in the future. Um, I really got a lot out of this to hear about some of the trainings. I'm always curious about what other people are doing um, outside of their realm to improve themselves as fighters through self-defense, you know, what something might happen on the street, or doing as competition event, which is as real as it gets type of fighting against
Right on.
someone training to knock your head off.
Yes,
So
sir.
yeah, and you survived your fights, you didn't get knocked out, you know.
Right on.
So I appreciate you you know, keep doing what you're doing. I'm an observer of what you're doing. So, and hopefully we'll meet and do some push hands if you're ever here on the East Coast. Looking
Yes,
forward
sir.
to meeting and catching up.
Yeah, Matt.
Mhm.
Thank you always, man. Thank you for the interest, man, and thank you for the platform just for me to share some tales and details, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Yes, sir. Take care,
All
man.
right, Jayo, have a good
Likewise.
one.
You
All right,
too. Bye bye.
later.